Hi, I'm Joanne. My last name is Jemsek, which is not a very common name, and so I am in fact related to Dr. J. He is my father, and we grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina. In 2010, I decided to move to Charleston, South Carolina. I was working in ministry for a long time, and I had gone back to grad school in 2006 to get my master's in counseling. And I had the opportunity to do an internship at the Medical University in South Carolina and finish my degree, and I got licensed as a licensed professional counselor in Charleston, in South Carolina. And so I have been there since 2010. And other things just about me, I grew up dancing. I loved to dance, loved to perform. I had to pick between gymnastics and dance at some point. I cried a lot and chose dance. And I had the opportunity after college, or in college and after college, to do some semi-professional dancing in Charlotte. So dancing's been a huge part of my life, and just being athletic and active and outdoors. I'm a Christian. My faith is really important to me. I also just really have a huge heart for people. I love to know their stories, and so that really led me into counseling and wanting to help other people. And it was 2017 that I noticed that I was just not feeling well, and I had dealt with some depression in my past and had been on a medication and got off, actually got depressed, got back on it, and never quite returned to baseline. Was having some sleep issues, and they were just progressively getting worse. I had been working at a university for 4 years. I directed the counseling program at Charleston Southern University, and then I decided to go into private practice, so I started the business and was able to do that for a year, which was really neat. I'd also worked with clients in the drug court in Charleston County, so I had this diverse experience, and so I went into private practice. And during that year was when I really noticed I stopped feeling well, and I decided in August of 2017 to take a sabbatical from my private practice, and little did I know what was in store for me in the years ahead. So in 2017, when I took my sabbatical, my whole thought process was I needed to heal. And for me, that meant healing spiritually and emotionally, and really figuring out what I wanted to do next, if I wanted to stay in private practice. And so I thought, a couple of months, I would just sit on the porch with a cup of coffee and Jesus and my journal, and just I would really turn a corner, and in a couple of months just be continuing forward with my life. And the first thing actually that I did was I saw a psychiatrist, and I had been on a low dose of an antidepressant for a long time without really any trouble. I could never increase that, even though I'd had symptoms of a mood disorder and the insomnia. So the doctor put me on a new medication, and for some reason, it's like I fell off a cliff. And I've talked to my dad, and he says, there's several ways that people can crash. They can sort of climb down the mountain, they can slide down the mountain, or they can just fall off a cliff. And I chose option 3. And so I got on the medication. I started having really severe anxiety and panic attacks, which had not been a part of my story. And the doctor said, oh, these are just side effects from the medication. So they gave me more medication to try to cover the side effects until I adjusted to the meds. Well, I wasn't adjusting. And very quickly, all of that anxiety and panic just turned into fear. My sleep issues got worse. I stopped recognizing myself in the mirror. I started having tremors, and my whole body was just convulsing. And so the doctors just kept putting me on new medications, and I even went to see one psychiatrist, and at that point I was on medication plus other medications, and I'm convulsing in his office, and he just told me to go take another pill and take a nap. And I just said, you're fired. It was it was so confusing and so frightening to suddenly feel like I had no control over my mind and no control over my body. And that journey continued. I tried to do a spiritual retreat and kind of dig deep, which normally would have been something I could have engaged in really naturally, but I couldn't because I felt like my brain was offline in the panic. And so then between August of 2017 to the end of that year, by the end of that year, I was in outpatient treatment for what, again, I thought was just mental health issues. But now looking back, it just so obviously wasn't. And I would just be at this place just curled up in a ball on the floor. I couldn't sit still. I was so restless. And again, that sense of just not being in reality and, again, not feeling present. And I did the outpatient, and there were some really kind counselors there. And one of the doctors said, are you blaming the medications for your anxiety disorder? And of course, I was trying to be nice, but I thought, yeah, like before I started trying all these different medications, I didn't have a lot of these symptoms that I'm coming to you with. And so I left there, and again, it was just more medications, more antidepressants. I could go into the list, but, and especially being a counselor and working with psychiatrists, like I knew what all these medications were, and I knew their classifications, and it just was, the list was building. And so at one point, again, just feeling kind of like I was out of my head, I had NAD therapy recommended to me, which is IV therapy. And so it all felt very promising. 10 days, you get these infusions, you start coming down off of some of the things that you've been put on, and magically I'll be better in 10 days. Absolutely not. Just was worse. Just some of the really kind of dirty details, if that's okay to share. I remember just taking my hands and just banging my head, and I remember just having such negative thoughts, and some of these medications would cause me to have suicidal ideation. It wasn't, I knew deep down, I think because of kind of my faith and just knowing, okay, there's got to be hope here, and because I had good support, it was not something that I acted on. But I would be driving down the road and I would have these thoughts, just, I don't want to live, I don't want to live, I don't want to live, death, 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 like these things just going, these really intrusive thoughts. And so by that spring, I was in inpatient treatment. And again, just hoping for anything that would make me better. And so I, again, was being put on different medications, told that I had different diagnoses. I can't even name the number of diagnoses I was given throughout this journey that were all, psychiatric. And so I would be just awake at night, and my heart would just be racing and pounding all night long. I mean, I'd be at the nurse's station constantly, just, I don't know what's going on. And one of the psychologists said, you're just not processing your emotional issues. And I thought to myself, I'm a counselor and I have been in counseling. I am not afraid of being in counseling. This is different. I just feel like my brain is broken, like something is wrong. And at this point, my dad is talking to my doctors and just trying to help in any way he can. And of course, my dad being who he is, a lot of times the doctors who were frustrated in me would sort of change their tune toward me. But it was weeks into that program, and I was making zero improvements, doing everything I could to just hang on to hope. And again, that, something would take away the crazy. And people say, oh, don't call yourself crazy. And I think, well, that fits for me. I mean, I had to use some term to describe how I was feeling. And again, just my body, I felt restless all the time. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't watch a movie. I just couldn't do life anymore. And I'd been athletic. I'm getting weaker. I just lost myself. I just completely lost myself. And so going through that program at the end, I remember talking in a group and just saying that I felt defeated. And that was in response to a conversation I'd had, just because people in my life were also frustrated. I had great support, but other people were frightened for me because they didn't know what was going on either. And so in the middle of the group, the doctor said, well, maybe your treatment team is defeated too. And I just thought, wow, that was really hurtful. Really hurtful. And so where I was being called non-compliant, I decided to just get on another medication because that would be the compliant thing to do. And me wanting to be a people pleaser and perfectionist all my life, I thought, well, I just need to do what they are telling me to do. And that one was the worst one. And so I get home and I'm just pacing around rooms and I can't go anywhere. I can't go to the gym. I can't go be with my friends. I can't work at all. To this day, I still have not been able to resume working. And so then I know at some point I took myself to the psych hospital and I was talking to doctors about doing transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is like where you get your head tapped on with magnets for treatment-resistant depression or whatever it was that they had diagnosed me with at the time. And I did that for 30 days. Again, every single time I would put my hope in something and then it would be like, this didn't work again. And there's a verse in the Bible that says, hope deferred makes the heart sick and a longing fulfilled is a tree of life. And I thought my hope is continuing to be deferred. And so I also was noticing at the time that I would have increasing sensitivity to lights, sounds, smells. I had to go to the Apple store and get a new phone. And I just came home and just curled up in a ball. And I would have these things where I was just reacting towards people and not in ways that were so uncharacteristic for me. And again, just fear, so much just like fear all the time. And the insomnia was persistent. It lasted for what feels like years. Just so little sleep. And then I set my sights on a detox facility and thought, let me just get off all the meds and start from baseline. And it's going to be holistic. I'm going to get in the sauna and have a massage and do all these things. And I was advised against it by my family, including my dad, who just at this time I know already really was leaning towards a diagnosis of Lyme. And I had had some labs in the past that had showed a marker for Lyme and some really high inflammation, but I ignored it. And being my dad's daughter, I thought, oh, you think everyone has Lyme, So I just wasn't buying into it at the time. But I went to this detox facility against other people's wishes. I just threw, my savings into it. And thankfully, I had some family support along the way. I know that that's a really huge blessing. And so I went and I was my absolute sickest there. They were giving me chelation therapy, which is for heavy metals, putting me in a sauna up to 2 hours a day. So I was doing all these things, but my panic level grew to a point where I could not stand being in my own body. I would look at a mountain and I was like, what is that? Like, is that a mountain? I started having like the rage. It's just super scary. I was getting weaker and weaker and weaker. I would sleep for 0 hours a night. I would have these episodes just going out of my head. And so finally, and I've probably missed a lot of details, but I wanted to really emphasize the psychiatric trauma that I endured. And I don't use the word trauma lightly at all. I'm curled up in a ball in the nurse's station on the floor, and I call my dad. And of course, he's been a part of this journey, but hasn't really pushed until this night. And he said, "You're a wonderful person. I love you, but I'm sick and tired of watching you go down this road. You're not going to get better doing what you're doing. The psychotropics, the neurotropics, all this. Your brain is on fire. You have an infection. And I just almost still didn't want to hear it. But looking back, it was so valuable to me. And so I continued with this program, and then finally, at the end of it, I did find out that I had a high level of mercury toxicity. And I was thinking to myself, I have no idea where this came from. And, I didn't have mercury fillings. I didn't eat a lot of fish. I wasn't sucking on thermometers. It was, and so I go, okay, this is it. Again, it's like everything, like, this is it. This is what I need to do. And then I'll be magically better. And so I went to a doctor in Charlotte who said, like, and I really, really respect this doctor I saw in Charlotte. In fact, this doctor and my dad know each other. And he said, let's test you for mold. And so I came back, my scores came back that I had off the charts level of mold in my body, just toxic, which it's called mycotoxins. So basically my toxic burden was so heavy. And so I started doing even the mildest detox for mold, and I would just keep getting sicker. So finally, in February of 2019, I come see Kim. And she says, after my entire evaluation, she comes and she goes, Joanne, I agree with your dad. You have the bugs. And I thought to myself, okay. And one thing my dad said to me that really made a difference in this whole journey, because again, the irony was almost too much for me that I could be his daughter and have Lyme disease. And he said, yes, you can have the heavy metals and you can have the mold, and they're all in the boat together. But the Lyme is what's driving the boat. It's the motor. And so that helped me make sense of all of the other pieces of the puzzle. And so I started treatment in February of 2019. I went on a stabilization protocol and then started treatment in March of 2019. Just to kind of say in the middle of all of this that I have learned over the years to kind of have this, to try to be poised. But even in this interview, I have been in this anxiety, and I've had a ton of fight or flight. And then when I go into fight or flight, I can go into shutdown and get spacey and feel like my brain is offline still to this day. And so I just want people to be clear that I am much better, but it is still a healing journey. So I started on stabilization in 2019, and then I started on treatment. And I remember Kim saying, using this term, blue sky days. After a while, you will have blue sky days where you might have a blue sky minute, and then a blue sky hour, and a blue sky afternoon, and a blue sky day. Well, early in treatment, I did. I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. I'm having a blue sky day. And then the treatment got harder. Kim started adding onto my protocol. And I don't laugh because it's funny, but because I look back now and I just didn't realize, that was that kind of moment of bliss. And then I realized that I had to dig deeper into the tissues, deeper and deeper and deeper. And so I got put on a protocol for babesia. And I got put on the xylitol, which if people have been in treatment or if you're not, that digs into the biofilm and it just gets out everything that has been stored in your tissues. And so I had really strong reactions to the treatment. I remember just emailing and trying to understand, I wanted so badly to just wake up one day and to be like, oh, okay, that worked great. And I can just go back to normal life. And that's not the journey with Lyme. It is a process. And especially for me or for anyone who's gone through a lot before you get to that point of being diagnosed and treated. And so I still was dealing with a lot of panic, and it took a long time to get my sleep under control. I had to accept that I needed to take certain medications so that I could get sleep, so that my brain could heal and my body could heal. The herxing is real. I would do my best just to try to detox and do everything, that I was told to do. But I also deep down had this kind of distrust, and I've realized, and I can share a little bit, at a different point about where that distrust comes from and how that caused me to react to the treatment. Because I think at that point I was like, nothing's going to get me better. So whenever I'd have a reaction to the medications, I would be like, this is not working, this isn't working. And so it made it more difficult to accept that this was truly a process that was going to help me. And Kim is so wonderful to say, hang in there, Joanne. And don't give into a defeatist attitude. Like, you are getting better. This is a part of the process, and helping me walk through what I needed to do to get through those really hard times during treatment. And I'm so grateful. And of course, my dad too. He's not my doctor, and he even said, I don't want to be your doctor. I'm going to let Kim really run the show. But being that I had a science background and growing up in a medical family, it's like I always just wanted to know everything that was going on. And so I just continued to have a lot of symptoms related to my brain and my nervous system, which is what I've learned has been really where the Lyme attacked me, was my central nervous system. Neurologically, a lot of brain fog, a lot of derealization, which is kind of not feeling present to reality, depersonalization, not feeling at home in my body. Again, just kind of feeling sick, feeling that anxiety in my body, and the depression would come and go. And so the treatment, it was getting into my brain and digging into the tissues in my body. And so it just takes time. And so as I went on these different protocols, I would have different responses to the meds, and even had to go slower than the average person because I happen to be sensitive to medications, very, very sensitive to medications, even supplements. And so it took me longer to really ramp up to a place of where I was on a full protocol. And so that year, people would say to me, Joanne, I can see you getting better. I was able to get out and do things that I had not been able to do for a while. Not consistently, but occasionally. And then I would kind of go back in, and I'd have to rest and just be at home. And so that process has just continued. And so Babesia and then Bartonella and all the different co-infections that I've learned about. And so it hasn't been an easy journey with the medications. And there is something called pill fatigue that Kim says is very real. And some of the tinctures, like the cryptolepsis, are really disgusting. But ultimately, I had to trust that what was happening by taking the medications and creating these Herx reactions was for my benefit, so that I could clear the toxins. And then I would have these washout periods. And during the washout periods, it would take me longer to wash out, but I would know, okay, at least I have a break. And the breaks would give me some relief. I don't want to pretend that I got a ton of relief, again, but I would at least be able to accept and realize what was happening to my body. And so fast forward, 2020 was COVID, and so a lot of isolation in COVID, which made it harder because I think in about February of 2020, I felt like I was ready to start doing things again. I was ready to go on a retreat with my church. I was going to go to a golf tournament, go to a concert, and all of it got canceled. And so that pulled me kind of back inward, where I felt like I was ready to try again. It kind of killed that motivation. But the whole time, I'm just holding on to my faith, my support. There is meaning and purpose in this. How is God going to use this? And just trying to have vision. And then there were times that vision was completely gone, and I just couldn't even remember what it was that that I have been anticipating for my future, being healthy and whole again. So where I am now is, I have to recognize that I'm a lot better than when I started treatment. I'm so thankful to be out of the chaos of what was the 2 years prior. And I am now, I know I've been told by Kim and by Dad, there's a treatment phase and there's a healing phase. And so my treatment has actually decreased in terms of how often I'm taking my antibiotics and my herbals, and I'm really bad about buying way too many supplements online, but I'm whittling things down. And that's been really great to be able to say, wow, I can do this without being on, so many medications. And my heart for other people, but also my goal for myself right now is to put everything I have into healing. And for me, healing means healing my brain and my nervous system. And so I have really been exploring for myself ways to do that. And one thing is, I like to use an example of the brain, being a hand. And if this part is the limbic system, which there have been a lot of live streams my dad calls kind of the dragon brain. And then this is the frontal lobe, which is like executive functioning. Well, this part has been offline for a long time. This part has been running the show. So my limbic system, it's fight or flight, it's fear, it's negative beliefs about the future. It's a lot of where the memories are stored, the traumatic memories. And so I can get easily triggered just by thinking about things that have been bad in the past. It may not even really have to do with the Lyme as much anymore as it is just healing from everything I've been through in my brain, trying to almost protect me from having to go back there or, reliving some of those things. And so I do feel like my infection load is going down. And I've been told that even in my most recent appointment. And yet this part, the brain and the nervous system are still overworked. And so I'm doing some limbic retraining, and I tried some neurofeedback. I might go back to that. I am really excited about that process of what it means to retrain the limbic system, and it involves doing exercises and meditation and really getting into a better space mentally, which then translates into being into a better space when I'm out in the world and things aren't so scary and my body can calm down. I've also really had to watch my stress level, and I've had to recognize when I'm going into what Kim calls a stress vortex, because it's easy to do too much too soon or get overstimulated and go there and then panic and then have to take days to kind of climb back out of that. But as I heal my brain and explore more ways to do that, even being a counselor, it's really fascinating to me. And even as a Christian going, God gave us good bodies and he gave us good brains, and they get broken, but we can heal. I can heal, even though I haven't believed it at times. This is where my focus is now, is that nervous system and healing my brain. So to anyone who is battling Lyme right now, first of all, if anyone's watching this and you don't know if you have Lyme, please get evaluated, because there are so many other disorders, diseases, and especially the neuropsychiatric piece, which for me, I never would have correlated. Even being my dad's daughter, I didn't understand that Lyme can affect your psyche and the neurology. And so all of those symptoms and all of these other mystery things, people say, I don't really know what's wrong with me, get evaluated for Lyme and biotoxins, because it can have such a huge impact on all systems of the body. And I now know that. I'm really thankful I know that. I also have, people, it's easy to say, don't give up, don't lose hope. But I can't promise you that I haven't wanted to give up or haven't lost hope at times. And they say hope is a choice, it's not a feeling. And so I've had to hold on to the hope of other people for me. And on days when I have felt like giving up, I remember waking up and saying, on nights that I could sleep, to wake up and I'd say, Joanne, your job today is to survive. Your job is to stay on this planet. And I would just do whatever I had to do to reach that goal. And that's thankfully not what it's like today. And so even in the dark times, I think really just having that perseverance to say, I'm not going to let this win. The other thing I really want to say to anyone who's struggling with Lyme is do not double down on your stress. And what I mean by that, or do not double down on your suffering. You're already suffering enough with the symptoms of Lyme, whether that's, and again, it has been in my physical body too, not being able to exercise, not being able to do what I want to do, not being able to work. But the doubling down on suffering means that when you're already struggling, you then top it with shame and negative messages. I'm a failure. And just all of these negative thoughts about yourself. And we don't always realize how we're talking to ourselves and making it worse by just believing these lies about who we are. There have been times during this journey where I have behaved in ways that I never 4 years ago would have thought I ever would have behaved that way. Out of control, out of my head. And then feeling so much on top of that, just shame and guilt and regret. And the thing is our brains and our bodies are being hijacked by these foreign invaders. And so a lot of times we're really not in control. And so some of that is a symptom and a reaction to not being able to employ the resources that we once had. And so saying, you know what, this really isn't me. And I know that right now that what's happening to me is being caused by something that is affecting my system. And if I can say and be, if I can be kinder to myself in that, then it helps alleviate some of that extra suffering. I also say evaluate your relationships. And if you feel any sense of stress in a relationship or what I call toxic relationships, just exit, because there are going to be people that come in your life that support you and you never knew. They are people that barely knew you before. And then there's going to be people in your life that knew you really well and maybe didn't show up in the way you thought. We all come in with stuff before we're diagnosed with Lyme. And for me, a lot of that was like the mental, emotional stuff. And so a lot of that stuff gets exacerbated with Lyme. And so having to recognize my patterns of like how I attach to people and how I reached out for reassurance constantly, just seeking, and going, these were patterns that probably existed before, but now they're like lit up. And I realized I wanted medication to make me all better. I just wanted to take the pills and just be better. And now I'm realizing I have to do the spiritual work, the emotional work, the mental work, the relational work. I have to focus on the whole picture and not just the physical. And that's what I wanted to focus on for so long, because again, magical thinking says I'll just take a pill and then I'll go back to my regular life. I've also had to realize that this journey can sometimes take longer. No, it has taken longer than I would have ever wanted it to, but slowly but surely being able to step into what God has for me next and what God has for anyone who's suffering right now. You have a story to tell. There's a plan for your life. People need you. And this testimony, like my prayer is that I will have a testimony to share that will give other people hope. And would I have ever wanted it to take this long? And even longer. I'm not there yet at all, but it'll be worth it if I can help other people who are suffering and going through things that are really scary and feel outside of their control. And so I would say to someone, you also are that person. And that since I haven't had hope a lot, and I've had people hope for me, I just want to express that I have hope for you if you're listening to this video. Because, well, first of all, it's easier to believe for other people sometimes than it is for yourself. But I just really believe that there's hope. And I'm so thankful for my dad. I'm so thankful for Kim. So thankful for Kim's patience. She's been so patient with me, and her steadfastness, because they know better than I do. And while I've had so much fear that has caused me to not trust that anything would get me better, well, all that does is cause me to try to white knuckle and control my life to try to survive. Well, what happens when I think I'm going to let go of control? I feel like I'm going to fall back off the cliff. Truth is, if I let go of control and just surrender to the process, it gets better. Because I can say, it might not be today, might not be tomorrow, but there will be a time when I'm able to do and live more fully into the life that ultimately I want to live. And even if I walk with a limp, even if I still have my struggles, even if I have to watch my stress levels and my sleep for the rest of my life, that's okay. This is something I would have to say to people. Watch your language, because for a long time I would say, I have Lyme, I have anxiety, my anxiety. And then I started realizing that I can say, I'm healing from Lyme. I'm recovering. I struggle with anxiety. Not it's mine and this is who I am, but kind of turning the language into something that is more positive and more true, honestly. So that's a lot of what I've learned on my journey, is just talking about things in a way that reflects that I'm believing in healing more than I'm believing that this illness is going to get the best of me. I know it's easy to also to compare myself to other people, or compare myself to my past self. Oh, well, I used to be able to do, I was athletic like crazy, dancing and doing all of the, not CrossFit, but cross training. And I would just pride myself on having the healthiest blood work and blah, blah, blah. And, I compare myself to other people. Well, why don't they have to suffer? Why are they able to just seem, to be happy and kind of float through life? Well, everybody has something going on. But the comparison trap is really, really dangerous to go down. And so those are all things that I would just have to share. And just as someone who does, I've not always been able to rely on my faith in God, because I'm like, God, do I even really trust you right now? At the end of the day, I can trust him. And he's proving that to me. It's just hard. And so it's okay that it's hard if that's what your experience is right now. I really do believe that things over time, it's not this trajectory. It's this you're like, oh, I'm doing so great. And then you take, I do one thing and then I crash for 2 days, whatever. But I did that one thing. And, oh gosh, well, I feel like I did this, but I should have been able to do more. No, but I did that one thing. And so as I build on that, and as anyone who's going through this, it's a slow build, but I do believe that people can really heal from this. And again, I'm thankful for my dad having really spent his life dedicated to helping people get better, and who knew that I would be one of those people.